Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And today we're going to be continuing our journey of a look back at our BGHT Big Bear adventure that we had just a couple weeks ago. This is part 2. If you didn't catch part 1, you can listen to that episode last week. And we're halfway through Saturday, right? I think we're Saturday morning. We got a couple more days of gaming left to do, but lots of big games to talk about. So we're just going to jump right in here. As we wrapped up last week, we just finished Godspeed. So the next pick we had today was Revive. This is a game we did do a feature review about 6 months ago on, and I purchased a copy, and I've had a chance to play it a few times. But this was Chris and Adam's first time to get a chance to revisit Revive. So what do you think? How'd it go for you? I think you've both been excited to get back to it.
So yeah, Revive is a game I've been wanting to play since we played it, I don't know, a year ago, whenever it was. And I had a blast playing this one. Again, the player boards are spectacular. I love pulling off these circles and revealing this thing, and you get to put the circles over on some points or some little bonus. So that whole thing is nice and tactile and fun as you're working up these little tech tracks. That was great. You've got this, the cards that you're slotting in the top. And of course, you can engine build on those by adding these little bonuses every time you match the color of card with the color of little thingy doohickey that goes where that card is going. And that's something Tim always does fantastically. I always forget to do it until I say, oh, that's how Tim's getting all that stuff. I'm going to do that too. So I like that mechanism, the top half of the card, bottom half of the card, all this stuff I had forgotten since the last play. And then, of course, you've got the game board itself that's opening up. This ice is getting cleared as you're exploring out to the corners. That was fantastic. We did these little advanced side of the cards or asymmetric factions. And so I had this little crow or raven or falcon or whatever, this little falconer that would fly out there and give me discounts on everything. I had a blast doing that, and it worked out well for me. I got some stuff accomplished this game, which felt great. I had tons of fun going back to Revive, one that's been on my mind since we played it last time.
Yeah, this is a game that was even more fun on second play than it was on first. And I really enjoyed my first play this one as well. I think we all appreciated the thematic feel of it. You're moving out across this board. The world is getting warmer. The snow is disappearing. You're exploring. And this is a game where I really enjoy the asymmetry of the factions. Like Adam, you mentioned you had that little bird. I think you were sort of like a falconer faction where they had this bird that would go out and would extend your range and would get you stuff. I was these weird robot scanner people that could scan areas. And then once the area had been scanned, then people would have to pay me if they wanted to build something there, or I could get a discount. So there was a pretty high level of asymmetry in a way that it made it really fun. And we were really able to put into good effect, the benefits that our particular factions had. And then, there is really almost nothing in board gaming that is as much fun as this board, the central machine board, where you're slotting your cards in and moving these little tokens around in a way that gives you bonuses. It opens up new actions that you can take as long as you have energy to take these little actions, and they become little free actions. So if you can get 2 or 3 lightning bolts that you can recycle, and you have 5 or 6 or 7 additional actions that you can take based on these little machine spaces, then there is this crazy amount of new fun stuff that you can do, and you can really extend out your turns beyond what you can do with the cards. And the cards are also super fun too. The choices you're making about when to play a card, and you have to retire your cards for a round or hibernate your cards for a round after you've played them, so you don't get to play them again right away, and figuring out what am I going to need next round, because I'm not going to be able to use a card from this round. All of that stuff just created so many fun, interesting interactions, interesting decisions. It's such a cool puzzle, this game. I was super happy to play this one again.
There's so many fun mechanisms in Revive, but I think the thing that I always love is a game like this where there is a different setup at the beginning of the game. And in this case, it's these like city scoring tiles on the outsides of the board. So you're going to build up this engine and have to do some tactical moves throughout as you see new cards available to buy and things like that. But I love that you're kind of given a couple choices of where do I want to focus my game. You're also given that end game scoring card that drives that as well. And I just have a fun time working towards that every time. I don't think I've ever won this game. Adam took out the win on me, and I think beat me by 1 point on this one again. So that was really fun. I think we chat a little bit during the game, and that there is a bit of downtime on turns here because turns can go long and everybody gets 2 actions on a turn, and they can be pretty lengthy actions. And I think it's exacerbated by we were playing all the advanced rules, which are mostly fine, but the advanced side of some of the faction boards give you these extra components you're manipulating, and you have to track what they do and the discounts you're getting from them and things like that. And every time a turn was going long, it always seemed like somebody was like, okay, let's see, I get a discount from that. I'm over here, so I get a discount from that. And it felt like that piece of it maybe exacerbated in a way that I hadn't seen as bad in other games. Although I think there's always a bit of downtime in this because of the nature of how lengthy those turns can go. So that was a little ping on it, but we finished it, and it felt like maybe some turns were dragging a little bit. We finished it though, and it was like, oh, we'd only been playing for an hour and a half. So it's not like the game itself overstays its welcome, but just some turns, if it bugs you to be sitting there waiting for someone else to think through their actions, it could get to you. But otherwise, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I was bugging myself with the length of my turns. You had these actions on the board that would let you recall a lightning bolt off of a piece. I think that's where a lot of the extended time came in, is manipulating your little free lightning bolts around. I remember that last time too. You could, pay a sprocket and pull a lightning bolt back, and then, oh, I'm going to use this lightning bolt. That's going to let me flip a treasure chest over, which lets me reactivate another lightning bolt. So now I can do these lightning bolts that are going to let me do these other three things. It keeps going and going and going. So yeah, that I was just getting like angry at myself. Hurry up, Adam, get this turn over with.
All right. Well, after Revive, we moved on to a revisit of Starship Captains. This is a game that Adam and I had played once before together and had mentioned recently on a show. Adam and I talked about it on the table segment, and Chris was interested in checking it out because of the cute Star Trek theme going on here. So we brought this one back out. Adam, this was your second play. You were pretty hot on in the first play. What do you think going through a second time?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun playing it for the first 80 to 90% of it. And then I was like, this is still, now we're just doing the same things over and over again. And it's, this could have ended already and it would have been fine. But it's neat. The game is cool. You're flying around. You're doing these little away missions. How am I going to use my crew members? Am I going to use them? Am I going to dedicate them to do this mission to get me some points and a little bonus? Am I going to go fight some pirates? Am I going to remove some damage off my ship, or, do some maintenance over here so I can hold more stuff in my cargo hold? Or maybe I'm going to do some maintenance over here so I can hold more technology down in my little tech area. So it's very thematic. I imagine that we're, flying on some starship. We got to go do some maintenance, fix this slot so we can plug in this new radar scope so we can fly across the galaxy and do this cool mission. There's a lot of that element going on to it. I thought that's one of the coolest things. I like the pirate refresh, the sort of countdown that you have as you're taking more missions, that's going to count down and you're going to flip these things over and the pirates are going to come back out. I like that mechanism. There's a lot going on here. There's the little boards, the little faction boards too. You're going around and race around those, get the bonus and the benefits as you're going around those. So a lot of ways to get points, nothing too savage. You can sort of steal a mission from somebody else, but then a new mission is going to pop up somewhere else as soon as that happens. So plenty of things to do here. Cute artwork, love the theme, but maybe it went on a little too long. What do you think, Chris?
I agree with you 100%, Adam. The good and the bad in this game. The bad was what you just said. It overstayed its welcome a little bit. For a game of this weight and of this complexity, it probably should have been about a round or two, maybe a half an hour shorter. But beyond that, I actually thought the game was a lot of fun. It dragged a little bit at the end because of the sameness, but I thought the theme was so engaging. I think the mechanism set was a lot of fun. The production was actually pretty delightful. I love the fact that you have this ship where there's like a corridor that goes around your ship and there's a ready room and you slide your guys over from the ready room up to the bridge and then they go off to the barracks, the berths, to go rest when they're done, and they go back to the ready room and there's this really fun little bit of thematic movement that's happening on your starship. And of course, you're building out all your technologies and all that. So I thought all of that was very fun. It was fun completing missions. And so overall, the stuff I was doing, I was enjoying. One thing I did want to note that I thought was interesting, and it didn't really occur to me till about halfway through the game, but one unique aspect of Starship Captains is the fact that you have this technology row, but the technologies don't actually cost you anything. So when you take a technology from that row, you can take anything you want. You don't have to pay for it. You just have to take that action. And that creates a really interesting situation, because you'd think for that not to be just a complete mess, you'd either have to have technologies that were so inconsequential that it wouldn't make that much of a difference, or you would have to have technologies that were consequential but were so well planned out that you didn't have any overpowered ones or ones that could break the game wide open if you got it. like we've talked about in other games where you have technologies that, if one person gets it, they're probably going to be the winner. In this one, I actually thought they were all really interesting. They were all really fun, and they all seem pretty well balanced. So it was a treat being able to just go to this technology row and take something without having to, think about, can I afford this? You just take it. I thought that was actually a ton of fun.
Yeah, and I think that highlights where the problem with the length of the game comes from. Because the best part about it is building up this little engine. You got to remove the damage from your ship so that you can add technologies to your hold and your ready room, and then you can get to use these technologies. But the problem is that one of the main actions you can take in the game is building technologies. Another main action you can take of the 4 is to repair your ship. So by about the end of the second round, you've repaired all the damage on your ship. You've filled up all your technologies, and then there's nothing interesting to do except for wander around the galaxy and pick up these quests. And I think that's really the problem. And I think it's always amazes me when designers manage to so perfectly walk the line between giving you enough time to get stuff done in a game and then ending it before you're tired of doing it. And Starship Captains, unfortunately, missed that line. And, we were talking about at the end of the game, like if this had been 1 round shorter, if it was 3 rounds instead of 4 rounds, it may have felt exactly perfect. Or in the 3rd and 4th round, they give you 2 extra little cadets that you add to your ship, so extra workers. If they just didn't give you those extra workers so that you just didn't have such a huge amount of actions to take in every round, that might have fixed it. So it's interesting how close this game was to being really fun, but it does overstay its welcome. It gets past the point of you stop doing the fun stuff and start doing redundant stuff. And that's a shame, because otherwise it is a blast. It's a fun, colorful production, lots of fun things. And what I thought was cool on a second play was that the technologies led me to a completely different strategy this game than the first time I played. And we were all kind of doing different things. Like I had different actions that I was really good at, or different ways to score extra points that you guys didn't have. And so we were driving towards different strategies. That was fun. I just wish I didn't run out of interesting things to do by the end of the game.
I do want to call out the art on the mission cards again. It's absolutely fantastic. The character and the story that each one of these cards tells is really fantastic. It's just a little card, but they're vibrant, and there's sort of this comic booky type of look to them. So there's like basically a subtitle or something, peace talks, and you have these guys at a table talking about their heroics and this and that, distress call. You can see guys shouting and looking at this, save the planet. There's a guy who's sticking his chest out, drinking his tea with his pinky out, and he's really happy that he saved the planet. So just a lot of story that's told through these cards. It's a very long story.
The art style in this was, I think, about as perfect as can be for this type of sort of comedic, fun, light game.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of Clank.
All right. We went to dinner after that, and they had one more bigger game for the night and then one more very special game that I'm excited for Chris to talk about. But the big game that we played after dinner was Tzolk'in the Mayan calendar. And I think this was Chris's pick, but Tzolk'in the Mayan calendar with the Tribes and Prophecies expansion. Adam, this was your first play with the expansion. I know that, but second play for Chris and I together, and I'd played it one more time before. But what do you guys think of Tzolk'in? I was really excited to bring this because I had such a great play recently, especially with the expansion, so I wanted to revisit it.
This play brought this game down a little bit, soured for me a little bit. It looks like there's a trick to it. You get to the end of those little tracks and you keep bumping, getting resources and building buildings is what it looks like you're supposed to do in this game. And that's, if you don't know that trick, then you're going to have a tough time. That's what both of you guys did. Get to the track, bump the stuff, build the buildings, race to the buildings. Oh, Chris got the good building first, so he is still going to lose. Tim's going to win. And then I sit there and grab some corn and still let my guys starve.
Wow, you really make it sound enticing, Adam. You're really selling it. No, I can see what you mean. I would argue slightly that I've seen this game played by some really top-notch players who have killed me every time, and I think there are different ways to win this game. I like you said, I was down there, kicking it at the end of the building track or the resource track and getting free resources and building like the top-notch buildings, and I still didn't end up winning. You can win by really pushing your way up those temple tracks. You can win the game by putting a lot of skulls out on the Chichen Itza track. So there are different ways to do it, but I can definitely see how if you don't know all the strategies, it can feel frustrating watching someone else doing something. You're like, how did they even do that? and all of a sudden they've got 1,000,000 points and I don't even know what's going on. It's definitely happened to me.
Yeah, this is one of my only wins of this game ever. And one of the fun things about it was that I explored some different strategies that I'd never tried before. I know it looked like there was one strategy, but we used to think that about the blue skull track where, if everybody just rushes and puts skulls on the blue skull track. But I got beat trying that so many times with more experienced players. So I started stretching out a little bit and it was fun for me. I think partly I was driven by those prophecies, in the expansion, it gives you these prophecies that give you goals every round, but also penalties for doing the things that get you those goals in that round. And so it kind of forced me early in the game to look at those and say, here's some strategies I should try to make sure I'm set up for those. And it pushed me in different directions. That's what I love about the expansion. But I do think, even though it doesn't look like it, I think there's a lot of different ways to win this game and a lot of different ways to play it. I was going for one of those big buildings the whole time, for one of the big monuments, and Chris stole it from me. And then Adam stole the other monument that I wanted. I didn't even get a single monument, and still ended up winning that game. In this case, I managed to get a lot of points on going up those the God tracks, which I usually kind of ignore. So this time I thought I'd give it a shot, and that worked for me. I think there's more strategy here than is apparent, but you seem pretty frustrated throughout the whole play, Adam. So this won't be one that I'll be recommending that we play with you again in the future. I had a blast with it, though.
Yeah, I don't know what happened this play. Usually, in the previous times, I'd enjoyed it. And maybe I just need to go back to it. Maybe I was too late for me. I was getting too sleepy. So I'd be happy to go back and try this one again and maybe get my fourth worker and have more than 3 little workers the whole game. That's probably something I should have done.
All right. Well, our last game of the night was going to be our heaviest game of the weekend. And I know this only because Chris, it was so incomprehensible to him. This must have been the heaviest game we played all weekend. This is Marvel Remix. Busted out this little 10-minute card matching game, and Chris just looked at me the whole time and said, Tim, I have no idea what to do here. I'm confused. Chris, did you ever break through? I know you had a big win on it, but what do you think of Marvel Remix?
Well, speaking of too late and too tired, although, I mean, I did win, so I guess that sort of says it all. I was pretty much a dominant force in Marvel Remix. Now, this is a reboot of, what's the game? Is it Fantasy Realms? Yeah, there are not a lot of games where the whole concept just kind of bores me, but Fantasy Realms is one of them. And the whole idea of, I'm going to draw a card, and if I can match this card with this card at the end of the game, I'm going to get a whole bunch of points. So if I can match the Hulk with somebody else who has green skin, then I get a multiplier. Yeah, it's just not my style. I mean, it was fine. For a late night game, I was super tired. I was barely functional in my brain. And I still managed to win. So there you go. I guess that says something about the game. What about you, Adam? What did you think? What did you make of this one?
Yeah, I don't mind Fantasy Realms. I think it's all right. It's a quickie. So I have a lot of fun. And I don't mind the Marvel theme at all. In fact, I prefer it to orcs and elves and knights and whatever you have on Fantasy Realms. So it was fun to see Spider-Man wanting to work with other heroes and Magneto. Discard Magneto. I gave basically Tim the entire X-Men team and villains.
Yeah, he did.
I don't know if that worked out for him or not.
Still didn't win. He still didn't win.
I don't know what I was doing. There's a lot going on here. So if you like the mix and match of Fantasy Realms with the Marvel theme on it, which I didn't mind, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, this is the definition of a filler. This is a literally probably 5 to 10 minute game. There's nothing to it other than just let's kill a little time. And that's what the intent was we're all ready to go to bed, but let's spend 5 more minutes wrapping up for the night. And I think it filled that hole just perfectly. My favorite moment of it, though, where Chris was so annoyed and so frustrated the entire game and was like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing here. Taking way too long in his turns for a game that you're just supposed to pick up a card and discard a card. But the last round of the game he picks up, I discarded She-Hulk, and I just see his eyes light up. He finally got this combo together that he was waiting to connect. And then it gave him the win on it. So I don't know, Chris. I think you put way too much effort into hating on this game than you need to. But I'm also not a huge champion for it. I could care less.
I think what you mean is I put way too much effort into winning this game. No, and the theme was fun. I actually enjoyed the Marvel artwork. I thought that was cool.
All right, cool. Well, we had a big plan. So we actually started, before we played this game, in fact, we set up the biggest game of the weekend, and that was Voidfall, because it is a huge setup. And so we decided to just take our time, sit around, chat, and set up Voidfall tonight so that Sunday morning we'd be ready to get in. I could reteach you guys and we could get in and start playing. So we got the whole setup done. About 45 minutes with us working together, assembling ships and putting the board layout together and searching through technologies. And the whole time, I think all 3 of us were a little bit grumpy about it. Like, this could not possibly be worth the effort that we're putting into this. And I was even talking about like, yeah, I've had some good plays of it, but I just don't know that I'm ever going to get this played again. So maybe this will be my last play. But we got in the next morning. Everyone got ready to sit down, got some coffee, and I got into the teach. And it was really fun for me because especially Adam can get frustrated by these like heavy games with that are bloated, that have a lot of stuff going on. And he was looking frustrated on Saturday night when we were kind of setting out and putting it together. But about 2 minutes into getting back into the teach, Adam's eyes, he's like smiling. He's like, oh, this game's really cool. And so it was really fun to see you guys kind of refresh on what the game was and what it had to offer and why we enjoyed it so much on the first play. Because that's kind of how I felt when I got my first play in again after getting it as well. But anyway, I won't speak for you the whole time. What did you guys think of Voidfall?
Yeah, after this production line of assembling these little ship stands and putting this ship together and handing that over to Chris, and he could do his little part of the production line, and then handing that over to Tim, and he would place it on wherever on the map. And then we had to put out these little half moons up, and we had to set these hexagons. Tim was flipping through the book, and oh, that's the wrong page. I got to go back to this page. And oh, 2 more pages this way. And then here, oh, Adam, you forgot to put a little crescent moon thing over here. Yep, I did. Sorry about that, Tim. So we finally got this board ready to go, and we got into the game, and it was amazing. This game's fantastic. The flow is nice. The card play is fantastic. You have these cards. If you don't know, each of these cards has 3 options on it. You can only take typically 2 of the 3 unless you have a little token. You can take the third action, but that token's worth a lot, so maybe you want to hang on to that. You only have, I don't know how many cards you have, 9, but usually you can only play anywhere between 4 and 6, 7 of them per round. So you have to look at how many cards you're going to be able to play, think about what you want to get done that round, think about how many resources you have, if you're going to be able to do that. It's the choices are just fantastic. The production has to be the most extravagant in all of board games at the moment, one of the most extravagant in all of board gaming at the moment. It's a joy to play with and to look at, and the gameplay is fantastic too. I had so much fun playing Voidfall. Once we finally got to playing it and got done with all the setup, and turn it down wasn't too bad either. We were both thinking about, or the 3 of us, or at least Chris and I were thinking about, hey, maybe we should just leave it up and jump right into another one. But if we want to do a new scenario, Tim pointed out we have to reshuffle all the tiles and reset up all the stuff on the things. And it's almost just as much work, except you just don't have to reassemble the ships. You're still going to have to mix and match all these technologies from the different factions and put those in. And it's all part of it is just a horrible organizational system with those factions and the text. That's ridiculous. But you get past all that, the gameplay, the game itself is fantastic.
Man, there are so many conflicting thoughts about this game. And I agree with everything you just said in your description of the different mechanisms, Adam. So I won't jump into that. Rather, I think I just want to touch on that big question that we kept asking ourselves. Voidfall, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? It is an epic setup process. At the same time, it is a great game. And I mean, we talked about the player boards a little bit on our recent episode about player boards. And oh my goodness, what a pleasure it was with these big faction boards slotted into these nice 2-layer, 3-layer, I guess, mats where you slot in all your tokens and everything just fits so perfectly. I mean, the production, like you said, it's off the charts. But you spend so much time setting it up that we were constantly sort of quizzing ourselves, like, should we play this again? Could we possibly play this again without shooting ourselves right now? I mean, is it worth the effort it takes to set it up? Is it the complexity of the game? And I still am not quite sure I know the answer to that, because the game was so much fun. It was so engaging. And I think we all went into it a little bit afraid, because I think we felt like this is going to be bigger than it's worth. And Tim assured us that it was going to be worth it. And at least, we were going to be impressed by how streamlined it was compared to, or at least how intuitive it was compared to what it looks like when you're setting it up. And I think, Tim, that you were absolutely right about that. I was shocked at how intuitive it felt after a round or 2 in. But I think what I struggle with still is, if it came down to a game night anytime other than one of our big weekends, am I ever going to choose to go through the process of doing this? And the answer is probably no. So I think somebody had thrown out the idea of, well, one of us ought to keep this because we'll probably want to play this again at a future game weekend, but we all 3 don't need to have it. And I think that, to me, that's sort of the answer in the end. It's really enjoyable. I do want to play this game again. I almost wanted to play this game again right after we played it, but I'm not going to play it probably with anybody but you guys. I'm not teaching this game to anybody, and I don't know anybody who knows this game, so it's a hard sell, but it is definitely a game that has some serious upsides to it.
Well, it was a great reminder for me because after playing this, I'm keeping it, and it's got some of the challenges you talked about. But it was funny, Chris, after we dropped you off at the airport on Monday, Adam and I were driving down and talking about the summer, right? I'm going to be living close to Adam for like a month and a half over the summer, and just talking a little bit about getting into some campaigns that we've talked about and stuff like that. And he's like, you should bring Voidfall out. And I was like, you know what? That's going to be a great 2-player experience, but I don't even think I can fit that in my car again with my whole family and all the luggage we're bringing out and everything. And he's like, well, just leave it at my house. And that's what I did. And I'm so excited. So now Adam's got my copy of Voidfall at his house.
Nice.
So that way, when I'm out there this summer, we can play it a couple times. And if it's a blast, maybe I'll leave it in Long Beach with Adam, or maybe I'll bring it back home with me, probably to never get played at home. Or maybe we'll play it a few times and say like, great, we experienced that. It was enough. And maybe I'll sell it before I bring it back. But I'm glad we went back to it. You know, I was afraid that you guys wouldn't get as much fun out of it as I'd been having with it. My favorite part is those agendas. I love that the scoring just gives you different little motivations every time. And you want to, it's kind of like Fractal, where you want to start working on those scoring things as early as possible and reveal the new scoring as early as you can so that you can start to build up that engine of scoring. It's kind of like a little score engine builder. But there is, I actually want to ask you about this, Chris, because one thing happened in the game that I could tell you were very frustrated by. And it's that there are these little voidborn ships around the galaxy. And basically they are a little bit of just a mechanism where you have to just keep yourself protected. They're not that challenging to deal with, but keep corruption off your board and just have enough defenses where one ship can't get in and attack you. End of the second round, Chris is building up this huge fleet. He's spreading all over the galaxy. He's taking out Voidborn everywhere. But then we walk through the steps of that process and he realizes he left one destroyer on a space, and that one destroyer can't defend itself against one Voidborn going into his space. They basically kill each other off. So he lost the territory, had a big impact on his game. So I'm curious, I know that was a frustrating moment, but do you think it was good to see that there was actually value to having those around and that you have to plan for them? Or do you think it was bad because it just created a bad moment for you? How did that actually come out as you're thinking about the game after we finished it?
I think it was a misstep. I clearly could have, it was knowable information, it could be known by me that I would not have defended that spot. I thought that I could, but I think misinterpreted the transaction and the combat. And
can't imagine how you could have misinterpreted that iconography for those things.
No, but really, it was, I can't, if it was a flaw in the game, it wasn't a flaw that there was some information that was hidden. It was just the nuance of the sort of like the process of going through the combat, which is fairly complex. I made a miscalculation and it ended up pretty much hosing my game because once I lost that sector, that was a critical sector for me. And I needed to spend pretty much the rest of the game recapturing that sector. And at that point, I didn't have any way to go out and score any big points. So it was frustrating, but it was my frustration based on my own actions.
No, it's a shame because it's just a procedural thing. How well do you understand the proceedings of the game? It had nothing to do with, was it the right strategy or not? It was just like, oops, I forgot that this dude's going to come in and he's going to be able to take me out because of whatever, because that's how the game is going. So it's kind of like in, Spirit Island, these invaders are coming. Are you going to be able to defend them? And then, what is it? My ship is way bigger and it looks way tougher than their little weak ship that's going to come in there. But somehow it's going to win. Oh, dang it. Yep. I see now that's right. That's going to come in. And so, yeah, that was frustrating for me to see too. I was like, that shouldn't have happened. And it really took you out for the rest of the game, which was too bad. I don't know what I think this game has so much to offer. I think it's so big. I want to talk about it some more. I think managing the corruption is one of the best parts, one of the most difficult parts about this game. Where are you going to put it? It's one of the actions, a lot of the actions of the cards let you remove this corruption or move it around, put it somewhere else. So managing that, getting rid of it, having these sectors that are pure, no corruption on these sectors, that's a lot of big point scoring opportunities come out of that too. I don't know. So Chris, what are your favorite parts of this game? Besides getting whooped up on by a little tiny Voidborn cruiser.
I think my favorite part of the game was the interesting use of the multi-purpose cards.
Yeah.
It was that 3 actions per card, and then you take 2 of those actions. That made for some really interesting decisions. I want to point out one card in particular that I found so it was so thematically interesting to me. There was one card, you have most of them are just all benefits. They're good. You do things, you pay something, you get a benefit. There's one card called Temptation, and it's kind of like the quote unquote evil card. It's the one where you get to do some pretty powerful stuff, but you have to take corruption to do it. And it was funny how, as I was playing through this, there was a point where I'm like, I think it was right after I lost that sector, and I'm like, I need to do some quick building up really fast. And immediately my brain started going, well, I can just make this one compromise this one time and take this strong action. I'll take some corruption. That's okay. But I really need what the Voidborn can give me right now. And I'm like, what could be better than that thematically? Then it's like I'm literally falling to the temptation and being willing to take corruption because I need to build a couple of ships really fast or something like that. And so I thought those cards overall were a lot of fun. And that card in particular, even though it was kind of a hot potato and nobody wants to actually use it, was great fun when I actually did, and it felt so thematic to me. That was one of the highlights of my game, was doing the dirty action.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's funniest, and I never want to use it either, but it can be really strong, and I think it's actually even stronger if you use it in Era 1 or Era 2, because one of the actions lets you look at the kind of the Era round cards and choose what the next card is, so you have a little insight into what's coming, what you should prep for, how you could start getting ready to score points the next round. I really need to use that more. My faction, this is the first time I played my faction. And when you're playing with the asymmetric factions, sometimes you'll swap out some of the base cards for special faction cards. My one special card had one that let me basically give up one of my agenda cards to get a pretty strong benefit. And the whole game, I was like, I don't want to play that card because I don't want to lose one of these agendas. But in the last round, it was a few turns from the end, I realized that one of my agendas wasn't going to do that much for me. And the benefit was going to be a lot more valuable. Plus, I had another action I wanted to take that was going to give me an agenda anyway. So it actually let me kind of recycle one of my agendas while getting a strong benefit. So the nuances in this game are really deep. And I think what's great about those cards too is that almost all the actions have a cost of some kind. And so they're very tricky to plan around. Like, getting resources is not an easy thing to do in this game. So you could set up a huge turn of actions, but then you realize, wait, I'm going to be 1 energy short, or I'm going to be like, 2 money short of actually getting that thing done. It's such a cool puzzle to work around. And every game I played it, I get stuck at some point where I was so sure that I was going to have this big round, and I get to the last card I'm going to play. I was like, oh, I missed that one thing. I can't get it done now. The thing about that Voidborn attacking you though, like this happened to me in one of my last games too. And I think it's actually good that it does happen, because when you're first setting it up and you're going through that phase and you're manipulating all these pieces and you're like, why does that even exist? Like they do nothing. They're so easy to defend against. But as you spread out, it is something you have to be really aware of. And it adds this cool theme of like, oh man, I didn't quite prep myself and a Voidborn just came in and took that sector away from me. So that was cool. But the trickiness of calculating, even though it's all visible, the trickiness of calculating the combat does add, I think hopefully would get better with more plays, but does add a challenge that even, I didn't know if I wanted to go and attack you guys because I didn't want to sit through and go through the 15 rounds of salvo planning. I would have just gone by gut and seen what happened, which is exactly what you're not supposed to do in this game. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it definitely adds some brain burn into this already heavy game.
And I don't think we had a single combat between the three of us, did we?
No, it was close. And I probably should have attacked you, but I think I felt kind of bad about that Voidborn getting you at the last round. So I opted not to, but I think I probably should have, because that's one of the things about attacking in this game is that you can really take away somebody else's scoring, since most of the scoring is determined by what they control in the sectors they control. So since it's a competitive game for just earning points from your individual scoring goals, you can see the other person's scoring goals and go like, oh, if I take that sector, he doesn't meet this condition for 12 points, plus he's going to lose another 3 points from this other card here. And it can be pretty swingy. So it's something we probably should do more strategically in the future, but the threat's definitely there.
So going back to the combat, like, that's the thing. If somebody has a destroyer and 2 cruisers, and then there's like this, what is it, a carrier that I had, and somebody has some sentries, and maybe somebody has targeting and some other techs, and they say it's deterministic combat, but who is gonna you want to sit there and like pull all this stuff out and then calculate it out and be like, oh shoot, I'm gonna lose by 1 ship because Tim's targeting is 2 faster than my initiative. So 20 minutes later, you're like, oh, I decide that I'm not going to do combat now. It's such a weird thing. I know it's supposed to be a elegant Euro game and this and that, but that combat is just kind of anti-fun to me.
Math battle.
Yeah, it's a math battle. Yeah.
I don't disagree, but the way I've played it every time, which is fun, is that it's just like you see somebody building up stuff. Well, I better start building up stuff and then hope that they don't go through the math and calculate it out. I'll look scary. and so far it's usually worked pretty well, but yeah, not exactly a great strategic mechanism to work with, or not a fun one anyway. All right. Anyway, we spent a lot of time around Voidfall. So moving on to the next game of the weekend was Galactic Renaissance, a game that Adam recently talked about on the Table segment, a new Kickstarter delivery. How'd it go for you, Adam? First 3-player game.
Yeah, first 3-player game. I played this game with my dad, and like I said, the scoring kind of came to a little bit of a stalemate. But here, this one was a lot of text, a lot of reading cards, I guess. So what you're doing is you have, what's the easy way to say this? When you have a deck of cards that you don't ever shuffle, it just rotates through in order, revolving door style. So if you play 2 cards now, you're going to see those cards in about 7 cards from now. And we all start with a very similar deck. We have this draft at the beginning, which is kind of cool. Each of these planets that we're going to draft for a homeworld has a different ability. Each of these specialists has a different ability. And we're going to start with a different number of ambassadors, our dudes, our troops on planets is what's going to happen. Ambassadors on planets type of game is what's going on here. The main part about this game is, to me, the scoring conditions and how are you going to set up the planets and your ambassadors. I think it's ambassadors and your little buildings to meet the criteria at the right time when you're going to be having that scoring card in your hand. So that's kind of the trick of this one. At 3 players, I thought it was a blast. I had a lot of fun playing this one. I don't know. I guess there wasn't anything too exciting. There was never that wow kind of punch moment or stand up and cheer kind of moment. I feel like a few of the other games, at least we played, had that moment. But it was interesting. I thought it was sort of thinkier. How am I going to manipulate these guys and put them in the right spot? How can I set this up? I can hold the senator card, the scoring card in my hand for a few rounds to see if things develop the way that I want them to. And then I can strike at the right moment with the right cards in my hand to get 1 point shy of what I need for victory. And then Chris is going to win on the next turn. So I don't know. I thought that was kind of a neat play. I had fun. I think I had fun playing this one. I don't know. I'm still on the fence about it. I think it's interesting. I think it's very unique, the way this game plays. One thing that was weird to me with all those planets just kind of sitting out there, it seemed a little sloppy almost, with just planets scattered around, these little egg things floating around out there in space. But that's how Galactic Renaissance went for me. Interesting game.
I actually had a lot of fun with this game, but I'm not sure that it could survive a lot of plays, because I feel like the things you're doing are going to get really similar really fast. And that deck management that you were talking about, Adam, where you're cycling through your cards, but you're always keeping them sort of in order. You're not shuffling up your deck as you're proceeding. That was interesting, but the cards didn't seem to me like they hadn't, well, most of the cards at least didn't create huge differences in abilities, except for a few of them. And one of them I had, which I truly felt was an overpowered card, where I basically got to come in during a Discord, which is their version of combat. I guess you have too many emissaries on one planet, and then basically you have to knock them down until there's enough room left on the planet for everybody that's there. And I could just come in and take out as many of the people from another faction as I wanted to get down to that level. So I essentially didn't have to lose workers, that somebody else would be losing them instead, or emissaries, or whatever you want to call them. And that was, that felt overpowered to me. But a lot of the cards didn't have that kind of real dynamic sort of thing going on. The other thing that I didn't love was this end game mechanism where you get up to 20 points and then you have to score 10. You have to basically make the jump to 30 to win the game. In other words, if you're getting up to 20 and you get 5 points, it's not like you can go to 25. You have to get all 10 of those in one turn. And what that felt like to me was we all just piled up at 20, and then it took a few more turns, and then you're just trying to cycle through your deck to see. It really comes down to who can get to their senator card the fastest, which is the card that lets you, it's the primary card that lets you score the game scoring goals. And so we all just kind of piled up there and then waited until someone was able to pull together a 10-point turn, and ended up being me, because I got my senator first. And so I feel like it would have been a better game if it had just been a straight, keep scoring until you get to 30 and then the game is over. And I understand that's a catch-up mechanism, and you could ditch it if you wanted to. You could just play so you're scoring, straight scoring if you wanted to do a house rule. But it just felt like almost like, why do we need to play the first half of the game? Because all we're doing is we're all going to get to 20 and then go from there. One other quick observation. This game has some amazingly cool art in it. I loved looking at the cards in this game, but then at some point, somebody made the observation, none of them actually represent the things that are on the cards. So it was really cool art that doesn't actually seem to tie in with the thing that is on the card. So I still enjoyed looking at them. I still thought it was a beautiful game, but I left my, scratching my head going, why this, weird anteater looking guy is a senator? I don't know.
Yeah, and I looked up the artist after we talked about that. I looked it up yesterday, and his art's amazing. He's got a ton of great sci-fi art, and the stuff that we saw in this game were some of the things that he's got on his like portfolio website. But it almost felt to me exactly like that, like the designer or the publisher said, "Hey, this is good artwork. Let's just ask the guy to send us some samples, and we'll stick it on cards." Like, it didn't feel like it was illustrated for the intent of the cards. Or, somebody got the artwork and then they said, well, we'll make mechanisms and then we'll just name the card after the mechanism. And then the name didn't match the artwork. So there was a disconnect there. But like Chris said, it was still really cool to look at. So it didn't bother me too much from that front. From a mechanisms perspective, I think this game is deeply flawed. What it looked like to me was that they were trying to create an area control game where you were trying to trigger this thing that, it comes through your deck. So they kind of started with that, and they kept adding stuff in to make it work, but it never quite works. It reminded me a little bit of that. What's that area control deck building game in the Dungeons and Dragons world? I forget what the name of it is. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the one Steve likes a lot.
Underdark, Tyrants of the Underdark.
Tyrants of the Underdark.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So what this reminded me a lot of was like Tyrants of the Underdark. So the area control is basically just filling in holes on areas. So it didn't really feel like area control as much as it felt like just moving pieces around. But if I moved a couple pieces there with my card, well, that card went to the bottom of the deck. So the next person was going to draw their card up and move them off. So it's this little bit of like back and forth that wasn't super fun. And I don't know, like there was some clever things they were trying to do with the timing of the decks, and you had some way to manipulate that to some extent. But like the deck building part is another thing that I felt like missed. And I mentioned this while we were playing, that there was this game, Path of Light and Shadow, that I really didn't like at all. And one of the things it did is you deck build, but you deck build by randomly taking cards and throwing them into your deck. And that's kind of how the deck building worked here. Now, sometimes you get an option of 3 and you pick one and you put it on the top or the bottom, or you just draw one off the top and you choose to put it on the top or the bottom. But everything about it felt like I was kind of just taking an action because it's the cards that were in my hand. I didn't have a lot of control. I'm playing, 2 or 3 cards a turn, and those cards would play out, and then I draw my next 3, and I'm just going to play those 3 out. And they never came up in a different order. So it's like every 5 turns were the same as the 5 turns before it. The scoring thing that Chris was talking about, where you get to 20, yeah, I think that was built in there just to try to make this mechanism work, where it wasn't just about getting through your deck fast enough to score more often. What I did think was pretty interesting was that when you did get that scoring card, the unique conditions that were up, and trying to set yourself up to some extent to match those conditions so that when you did get your scoring card, it would work. But it felt really clunky and really like you didn't have a lot of control over when you were going to be able to do the actions you needed to adjust things. And it wasn't fun for me to just wait and then, just let the cards do what I could do on that turn. And then Adam would just push my stuff out of the way when it came back to his turn before I could ever score him. So yeah, to me, this was probably my least favorite game that we played over the weekend. Not that it wasn't interesting, but interesting doesn't always make fun. I think it just missed on some pretty big marks.
That's to push back a little bit, but not that much, because I can't argue too much with what you said. They do try to give you a little bit of control with that option to discard an additional card at the end if you want to cycle through your deck a little. There's a couple ways to kind of cycle through your deck a little faster, maybe. And then, Tim, you're right. You couldn't really do much. You could get yourself kind of set up in a position to score and hope that you had the senator card in your hand at the time, or you could hold on to that senator card. That's the other option you could do, is you could hold on to as many cards as you wanted to also. So if you had a hand of maybe, say, 4 cards, you could just play 1 and then hold on to 3, and then maybe those 3 cards plus the 1 you just drew would let you meet those scoring conditions, and you have the senators, one of the ones you held back. What else could you do? I almost had it. I was at 16 points. Both of you guys were at 20 points. I was almost able to make that jump. You had manipulated some of your dudes, to make it so I didn't have the scoring criteria I needed. the right. So yeah, I almost made that jump from 16 to 30. I was a point off, so I had to hang out with you guys. I don't know if I should have held the Senator card. So that's one thing I'm replaying in my head. Should I have held my scoring card to where maybe I could have gotten it the next turn? But it looks like I think Chris got it his next turn anyway. So we were kind of close there in the end. I do think it was the interesting, I wouldn't say deeply flawed. I wouldn't go that far as you went, Tim. It was interesting, and I think I'll go back to it a few more times. But yeah, as far as plays this weekend, it didn't stand out for me.
One of the things I did like was the variety on the planets that you could interact with. So that was kind of neat. And then, how that's sometimes synergized where you could chain up cards and chain up planets to do things together.
Yeah.
So again, some cool ideas here that I just don't think culminated. And I also thought there were some weird production decisions, which, like those little minis are cool and the artwork's cool, but then you've got these little standalone planets that are just randomly distributed out in the middle of the table, which was cluttery and felt like hard to keep up with. So anyway, don't want to dog on it too much. I would prefer not to play this game again if I had a choice, but if Adam really wanted to play it, I would always go back to it. It was not my least favorite game I've ever played, but just my least favorite of the weekend.
Well, as far as annoying games that I want to make you play again, I think Soul is at the top of my list for those. So.
I'm not sure which I'd pick at this point. Probably Galactic Renaissance would probably be my preference.
Oh man, come on.
I think I'd probably go with Soul.
All right, Chris.
Interesting. All right, cool. Well, we had one more heavy game, or we thought we only had one more heavy game in us for the night, and I picked Marrakesh. Marrakesh is a big Stefan Feld game. Chris has been talking about wanting to try some new Felds, and I was excited to get this one in front of you guys. What do you guys think?
Marrakesh was an absolute delight. I think what my favorite part about this game was, well, there's a few favorite parts. My favorite part was dropping these components in this amazing sort of dice tower looking thing, but it has this lattice work of beams going across the inside of it, the skeleton on the inner workings of this belfry or whatever it is, and your little things that you're dropping through your hexagonal cylinders, I think they're called. Some of those get stuck, and not all of them fall through onto the little bingo grid down there at the bottom where they all end up. So on subsequent turns, when you're dropping these little pieces in there, some different ones might get stuck, or those might knock out some other ones, or so you have this sort of variable mix of what comes out. I think that was really cool. About probably that doesn't make any sense to anybody, but this neat mechanism, you're dropping these things through essentially a dice tower, and at the bottom you're going to reorganize them by color, and they're going to have a draft of the colors of these little cylinders in turn order, and you put them out there on your amazing player board, and you get to do these actions, which those actions get stronger the more you have them filled in by color, and you get all the Stefan Feld points that he wants you to get. But this one, I had a blast playing. It's such a cool game. It didn't feel heavy to me. I felt like it was a nice, light, breezy, enjoyable game. Oh, this is what the best option is right now. I'm going to take it, and hopefully that works out.
Yeah, this game was a real treat. I enjoyed this one a lot. And to follow on from what you were just saying, Adam, you had all these workers of different colors, and you draft them. And, maybe if 2 greens came out in this round, there's 2 of them. So you get to put 2 of them out. So that's the desirable one to do, whether or not the green action is necessarily the one that you want to take. But to follow on from that, the reason why those colored workers were so interesting was because each of those different colors was a different little mini game on your board that gave you different benefits, like the gray ones that gave you tiles that you could buy, or beige ones that let you put out these gates that would give you points, or dates that you needed to feed your workers. You could go by playing the green ones. So each one had a little mini game that you're trying to complete. They would give you different things. I mean, it was definitely a bit of a point salad, a la Stefan Feld, but it was a lot of fun in the way that it was laid out. And the board, couldn't have been more exciting to look at. So colorful, so bright, so fun and enjoyable. And for me, I was happy to play this game, not only because the game itself looked fun and the production is a wonder, but I've been wanting to try more Stefan Feld games. I've enjoyed Castles of Burgundy, and this is a designer who I feel like I just haven't experienced enough. So recently, in one of our episodes, Tim had recommended for a Stefan Feld that I go with Merlin. I didn't get to that one yet, but I can now say at least that I have tried another new Stefan Feld, and been super happy with the outcome of that one. So I would love to play this game again.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed this. And I got to tell you that the way that Chris and Adam were acting during this game, you would think this was a party game. I've never seen so much noise and laughter during a Stefan Feld game than I saw during this game. But I'm glad I had a great time playing with you guys. I'm so glad it had fun. I love the little draft and the little token draft in this game where you have to choose your actions before you know what tokens you're going to get. And then people can mess with you. You're looking around at the other player boards and say like, oh, he wants that red action or the brown action. So I'm going to take those brown Keshis out of the draft thing. So there's a lot of little simple player interaction that doesn't totally mess the other people up, but it does mess them up. There's some fun engine building, these tiles you can get that gets you little abilities to race up the boat tracks. You're always looking to see what other people are going to be doing and competing with them. So yeah, great. For me, this is still a favorite. I was thinking about it after the play this weekend because I'd said recently I thought this might be my favorite Feld, where it used to be Castles of Burgundy. And I think, like Stefan Feld often does, even with Castles of Burgundy, is that the game runs just a little bit long, just like all of his do. Meaning that they're fun decisions, but you're doing it just a little bit too many times. And so I think because of that, I think still Castles, for the weight of game that you're playing with the types of decisions you're doing, I think Castles just feels a little bit more straightforward and streamlined. So I still prefer Castles, I think, over Marrakesh, but it's barely, and Marrakesh definitely adds a different experience that I like in a different way. All right, so we didn't have a ton of time left for our last game of the night, so we wanted to pick something we all knew pretty well that was going to be, fairly moderate weight, lightweight, and Pan Am. Pan Am was the choice that made it back to the table. What do you guys think of Pan Am?
Well, Pan Am, I think we were looking at my shelf, Tim, and I was, we're like, should we bring it? Should we not bring it? And we decided to bring it, and I am so glad that we brought this game. This game brings so much joy to me every time I play it. We had Chris's playlist going through the ages, starting back with the 30s music and some Scott Joplin and 40s. And I think there was some Sinatra in there. And then somehow we ended up with some 80s music going on when we were still in the 60s, I think. Something happened there. But we should have mentioned it on most interesting worker placement games. The way you're putting their worker out there, which is also a bid to do that action, during the course of the game, only one person gets the airport. Then you're bidding on these destinations. There's 4 destinations. The prices get higher as you go up on those. How important are those going to be to you? It can be pretty significant. And then you've got the different airplanes. Do you want a little junky trireme, or does that jet out yet? Are you going to buy that jet for a lot of money and try to get that expensive route from Pan Am? The decisions here are fantastic. Every time I play this game, it gets better and better and better. Chris thinks he had the win on this one. I know I was going to take it from him. For some reason, Tim started cleaning up the board game. We were having a lively discussion. Tim starts packing it up for some reason. I was going to take the strong victory. What were you thinking, Tim? This is unprecedented. This is outlandish. It makes no sense. Why would you do this?
It's outlandish.
Okay, this is not fair to me because here's what happened. Right, we're playing through this.
Not fair to us.
The last game of the night. It's like 11:30 at night. Last game of the night, and we're going to play this game. Get to bed. We all got a long drive, lots of travel the next day, and so we get to like 11:30, 6th round of the game. And then Chris and Adam start having this philosophical debate that just goes on for an hour and a half. So when everybody stops and is just sipping on drinks and having a debate for an hour and a half, that's the end of game night.
No.
That's like traditionally, that's what happens.
No.
And so I wasn't even thinking about it. All I was sitting here was enjoying this conversation with you guys, enjoying hanging out with you. And I just started doing cleanup like I do at the end of a game night. And it did not even occur to me that we hadn't finished the game at that point. So it was a mistake. I realized it shortly after I took just enough components off the board where we couldn't reset and fix everything. And I apologize. I'm sorry. But it did feel like it was like who just has an hour-long conversation in the middle of the 6th round of in the middle of your turn? Do you even know whose turn it was still at that point? Do you?
Good friends. Good friends have a philosophical conversation.
These guys.
Yeah.
Well, hey, but back to the game though. I mean, I cannot help but think that if I really came up with the list of if I had a game night coming up, what do I really want to play? Pan Am is hands down one of my favorite. I always have such a good time. I always have such a good time playing this game, especially if you doctor it up with some, like a little classic cocktail and the music. And it was great. Adam was like reading the flavor text cards, the event cards, using this funny, like, oh, and now here we are in 1946, and the airplanes are bigger and better than ever. And it was delightful. I mean, I was rolling on the ground in laughter and having such a good time. Tim was saying about Marrakesh being a party game. At this point, it felt like a party. We were having just such a good time.
Yeah.
And we were playing good music. And during Marrakesh, we were listening to Moroccan pop music.
Yeah, that was great too.
I mean, how much fun is that?
Yeah.
So I love me some Pan Am. I will always play this game.
Yeah, you guys are both like just bringing the theme in the game. I loved it. It was so fun. It's such a tense play again. 3 players. This game always surprises me with how simple it is, and yet how interesting the decisions are all the time. And this is one of the first games I played where people were really fighting over destination cards. There was like a good bidding war going on for destination cards half the time. Great play. I honestly think I was going to be my game, so I kind of just gave you guys a free.
Such a lie. Such a lie. No one believes that for half a second, Tim.
Well, apologies for that, but anyway, glad you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. That was our last game of the weekend. Great time, great weekend, so much fun. Can't wait to do it again with you guys. By the way, listeners, our next BGHT Con is going to be at BGG Con in Dallas in November. So if you want to come out, see us, we may even be thinking about some special events. We're not going to bring the details out yet, but we might be putting together some special events to hang out with our listeners and do something fun. So if you're interested in doing that, make sure to get your tickets for BGG Con and let us know. Keep us updated on social media if you're going to be there, and we'll work something out. I think that'll wrap up this episode, guys. We got one more review to read right now to get us caught up. As always, we appreciate these great reviews on Apple Podcasts from our listeners. Fun to read them and fun to hear from them. This last one was from Braden Sharp, and this is in the United States. His title was My First and Only Board Game Podcast, 5 stars. And Braden said, "This is my first and only board game podcast I will listen to. It's that good. This was the first board game podcast recommended to me when I started getting into board games." I'm going to stop right there and just say, whoever recommended Braden listen to this, thank you. And we really appreciate when you recommend us to other people in the hobby. It's a great way for people to get to know us. Then he continues, "The structure of the podcast is perfect and it's easy to understand. Simple but detailed reviews that's straight to the point. The hosts, Tim, Chris, and Adam, do a great job discussing their separate opinions and feelings on the current game. Also love hearing their top 5 lists, and one of my favorite episodes was when Tim went to the BGG Con. Such a cool episode. Didn't want Tim to stop talking about it." Okay, I'm going to stop there too. Did you guys hear that? He wanted me to keep talking.
That's insane.
After an hour and a half of that episode. Here he goes. He continues. "Sounded like so much fun. I really want to go to a board game con now. The cherry on the top is the poll questions of what games they have been playing recently. Wouldn't change a single thing about the podcast because it's the perfect board game podcast." Thank you, Braden. That was really nice to hear. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. So glad. I like to say this once in a while, and that when we set out to make this podcast, we wanted to make a podcast that we wanted to listen to. And I'm so happy that people feel like, that they get what we were hoping to get out of it, which is a podcast that just, brings the board game fun. And it's a podcast I like to listen to. So I'm glad you all are enjoying it as well. All right. Well, I think that'll wrap up this episode. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.